This is an excerpt from Deliverance Lost, written by Gav Thorpe, narrated by Sixparts Kaioken. Lord? Euphrania's confusion was matched by Bran's. A sideways glance at Agapito and Aloni showed that his fellow commanders were tense. Eyes narrowed. "We will not be fleeing without a last remark to our enemies," said Corax. "Should we power up the void shields and weapons batteries, Lord?" asked Euphrania, hand hovering over the command terminal. "No," said the Primarch. "I have something more dramatic in mind." On the strategium of the Valediction, Apostle Danask of the Word Bearers was finding his latest duty a stretch on his patience. The joyful anarchy and slaughter of the dropside attack seemed a distant memory after days of fruitless searching for the fleeing Raven Guard. His latest orders were no more exhilarating. For more than a day, his ship had been sporadically firing torpedo spreads into the area the War Master had ordered, with no result at all. It was a waste of time, and made all the more insulting because his brother legionaries were already en route to Cal for their surprise visit to the Ultramarines. It was hard not to feel that this was in some way a punishment for his breach of Legion rules, of which he had not been made aware. Danask wondered if perhaps he had not been dedicated enough in his devotion to this new cause. He had noticed Corferon looking at him strangely on occasion, and was sure that the Master of Faith was testing him in some fashion. He had offered no complaint when he had received his nonsensical orders, and had offered effusive praise to the Primarch for considering him for such an onerous but essential duty. "Energy signature detected!" The words of Kal Namir came as a triumphant shout from the scanner panels, snatching the Apostle from his thoughts. "Where?" demanded Danask, rising up from the command throne. Sirens blared into life, shattering the quiet that had marked most of the patrol's duration. "Almost on top of us, 2,000 kilometers to port," announced Kal Namir. "Weapons batteries are powering up. Void shields at full potential." "Mask energy signature and get me a firm location. Brace for impact," snapped the Apostle, realizing that the enemy would only reveal himself to open fire. He heard Kal Namir mutter to himself, swearing under his breath. "Speak up or stay silent, brother," rasped Danask. He was in no mood for his subordinates' grumbling. He punched in a command on the arm panel of the throne and brought up a real-time view of the enemy's rough location. A shimmer against the stars betrayed the presence of the Raven Guard ship. "The scanners must have malfunctioned. This makes no sense," Kal Namir said. He checked his displays again, and then turned to look at Danask with eyes wide from shock. "Signature is a warp core spike, Commander." On the screen, the enemy battle barge came into view, dangerously close, black against the pale glimmer of Istvan's star. Moments later, the space around the vessel swirled with power, a writhing rainbow of energy engulfing the ship from stern to stern. "Take evasive action!" yelled Danask, but even as he barked the words, he knew it was too late. The Raven Guard ship disappeared, swallowed by the warp translation point it had opened. The warp hole roiled wider and wider, washing over the Valediction. Danask felt the flow of warp energy moving through him, a pressure inside his head accompanied by a violent lurching of the cruiser. "We're caught in her wake," announced Kal Namir, somewhat unnecessarily, thought Danask. The Valediction shuddered violently as the spume of warp energy flowed past, earthing itself through the void shields. Tendrils of immaterial power lashed through the vessel, coils of kaleidoscopic energy erupting from the walls, ceiling and floor, accompanied by the distant noise of screaming and unnatural howls. More warning horns sounded a moment before an explosion tore apart the stern of the ship. The void shield generators overloaded by the surge. Secondary fires erupted along the flanks of the Valediction, detonating ammunition stores for the weapons batteries, opening up ragged wounds in the sides of the vessel. The shriek of tearing metal accompanied fiery blasts of igniting atmosphere, gouting from the massive holes to port and starboard. The valediction heaved and bucked, artificial gravity fluctuating madly, tossing Danask and the others on the Strategium to the ceiling and back to the floor. To the right of the Apostle, a communications attendant fell badly, snapping his neck on the mesh decking. Then there was stillness and silence. The shielding of the reactors had held firm, and no further explosions occurred. Several minutes of disorientation ensued, during which the Strategium staff busied themselves getting damage reports. The scanners were all offline due to the warp wash, the dozens of screens surrounding Danask all grey and lifeless. "Get me helm control!" he rasped. Anti-damage procedures continued for some time. Danask's head throbbed, an ache in the base of his skull growing in intensity until it threatened to be a significant distraction. "That could have been worse," said Kalnamir. "At least we survived." Blood started to drip from the word-bearer's eyes and nose, thick rivulets of crimson streaking Namir's face. The blood vessels in his eyes were thickening, and his skin was becoming stretched and thin. Danask held a gauntleted hand to his nose as he tasted blood, and saw a drop of red on his fingertip. One of the weapons console attendants gave a scream and lurched away from his panel, his robes afire with blue flames. The man flailed madly as others tried to help him, pushing him to the floor and swatting at the flames with cloaks and gloved hands. "Get them off me! My face! Get them off my face!" shrieked another serf, tearing at his eyes and cheeks with his fingers, stumbling from his stool. A subscreen flickered into life at one end of the scanning panel. Danask knew what he would see, but he looked anyway. Outside the ship, the stars had disappeared, replaced by a whirling vortex of impossible energies that hurt his eyes to look at. Even through the digitization of the display, they were in the warp, without their killer fields, unprotected. As realization settled in the Apostle's numbed mind, he felt something clawed scratching inside his gut. He dared not look down. A detached part of his brain marveled at what had happened. To engage warp engines close enough to drag the valediction into the Amaterium, yet far enough away not to destroy the cruiser, was an incredibly difficult thing to do. He wondered what manner of man could do such a thing. Around him, madness reigned. He fell apart from it all as his serfs and legionaries howled and roared, limbs cracking, warp energy swirling through their bodies, distorting and tearing. He realized he had asked the wrong question. Exposure to the warp was the most horrific death that could be visited upon any living creature. It was not what manner of man could do such a thing. It was what manner of man would do such a thing. He never got to answer his own question. Moments later, a horned, red-skinned beast erupted from his innards, splaying out his fused ribs and chest, his twin hearts held between fanged teeth. Danask's agonized scream, so inhuman, so unlike a legionary, joined with the cries of the rest of his crew.